Okay, this is part 3 of this book right here, Solving the Multiple Sclerosis Mystery by Hal Huggins. We're going to take a look right here at the global distribution of multiple sclerosis, and what you're going to see is it's super common in the United States and Canada. It's very common in Northern Europe. These are communities where people tend to eat more dairy. Roy Swank would tell you, if you look at Norway, it's mostly concentrated in the center of Norway where they ate a lot more dairy. He thinks milk with all its high saturated fat, and it's also thought to have antigens that autoantibody cross-reactivity relates to damage to the brain tissue, the myelin. Okay, so it's disease increased incidence in white people because they tend to live in these northern climates. Okay, but when people migrate from other places into these northern climates, they get an increased incidence of multiple sclerosis. Okay. There's almost none like in the South Africa area where the Bantus live, and that was just talked about in part 2. This is part 3 of the discussion of this book, Solving the Multiple Sclerosis Mystery by Hal Huggins. Okay, and then other reasons they think for it is, well, could it be vitamin D? Now, it's not just vitamin D alone, like I talked about latitude and longitude, and it wasn't the factor with Norway, for example. There's more amalgams placed in these areas. They eat more meat. They eat nowadays more processed junk food. You got a lot more fruits and vegetables available year-round in a warm climate. You know, in wintertime in a cold climate, there's not that many plant foods available. Okay, plants got fiber, so the fiber prevents leaky gut. That's the good stuff to help people be healthy. Okay, here's another picture of the distribution of disease. So where it's blue, that means there's hardly any multiple sclerosis, these dense blue areas. So look at this in Africa. Next to nothing. Okay, there's tons of black people in the USA that have multiple sclerosis. Okay, so the really light blue is pretty high incidence, and then it's even more in some of these colder areas, probably where they're eating, more meat, for example. Okay, if you got a lot of mercury in the fish mercury is methyl mercury, organic mercury. That'll increase your risk of multiple sclerosis as well. There was a lady named Jane Hightower, internal medicine doctor from San Francisco, wrote a book about mercury rising and all the brain damage it was causing cognitive dysfunction in all these yuppies. And why would yuppies be getting demented in their 40s? And it was because they were eating tons of fish, okay, full of methyl mercury. Methyl mercury is really toxic, okay. The mercury in the amalgams is elemental mercury, just the element itself of mercury, and it comes off the teeth as vapor, and that's not charged. Methyl mercury is also not charged. Both are lipophilic, meaning both can cross plasma membranes and cross the blood-brain barrier and cause brain damage, okay. Ionic mercury is when it has a 2+ charge on it. And ionic mercury is the one that's really strongly attracted to sulfur groups, to thiol groups. Okay. Notice all these Caribbean islands and tropical islands, they don't have hardly any multiple sclerosis where it's warm. Again, people eat a lot more fruits and vegetables in those areas, a lot less meat. All the plant foods have fiber that prevents leaky gut and that lowers the rate of MS. Also, a lot of these countries are third world, so to speak, and they're probably not placing dental amalgams as much. I'm just speculating on that, but that would likely be true. Okay, now here's another one of the greatest dentists of all time. This guy is Weston Price. He wrote this magnificent book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration in the 1920s and 30s. I think he's from USA and Canada. He traveled all around the world, including to Africa, including to the Caribbean, including like Australia, and a whole bunch of other places, all these Western countries. And he found that where people ate traditional diets, either of plant foods or of meat as well, they had no cavities. And they had nice formed dental arches, a nice, perfect smile. Okay, but when they started eating sweets and refined flour, they got tons of cavities. And they also had deformity of their dental arches. Their teeth were all crowded together. And so that's Weston Price. Now, here's the big story on Weston Price, what you need to know. It's very sad. This guy was a genius. He wanted to do the best. He put a root canal in his son. His son was 16 years old, and his son died. He got an infection from the root canal, and he died. And he had done the technique as perfect as it could have been done, and his son died. So he was freaked out by that. His son actually had a heart attack, and he's like, that's bizarre. He took the tooth from his son, he took out the amalgam, and he implanted it in a rabbit. He wanted to figure out what had happened. And then the rabbit died of a heart attack. He took the tooth out of the rabbit, planted it in another rabbit. The rabbit died of a heart attack. He took the tooth out of that rabbit, planted it in another rabbit. And that rabbit died as well. He did it in 100 rabbits. All rabbits died of a heart attack. So the conclusion he came to was the focal infection of the root canal tooth caused a bacterial toxin that had a predilection, a propensity to damage a particular organ system. Okay. Others confirmed his research. A guy by the name of Rosenau confirmed his research. Hal Huggins confirmed his research, as did many other dentists. Okay, so that just shows you, because you can never completely clear infection from a root canal. It's always infected. The tissue typically is hypoxic, meaning low in oxygen, and the bacteria will change from aerobic, oxygen-utilizing bacteria, working with its mitochondria to make energy, to anaerobic bacteria, meaning without oxygen, it makes ATP primarily from glycolysis in the cytoplasm, but it also makes a different type of bacterial toxin. The classic endotoxin of aerobic bacteria would be something like LPS from gram-negative bacteria, lipopolysaccharide, LTA, lipoteichoic acid from gram-positive bacteria, whereas from these anaerobic bacteria, the typical toxins are like mercaptans and thiol ethers. Okay, but he was devastated by the loss of his son, and he devoted the rest of his life to doing research about root canals and amalgams and finding out what a disaster they were. He was actually the head of dental research, I think, like in the whole USA or Canada, and they got so pissed off at him for criticizing root canals. They took his position away, they discredited him, they vilified him. That's what always happens. So basically, when you're a great genius and figures out something to help patients, unless it makes money for the establishment will discredit you, screw you over, ostracize you. And that's what happened to him. That's what happened to Hal Huggins. They took Hal Huggins' license away. Okay, they did not want him teaching the public the truth about this stuff. They didn't want it because they don't really care about curing the patient. They also don't want it because they fear the liability, the medical liability for the consequences of that. It's been known for a long time that mercury's toxic. That's been known since like 1900 by the people who studied it. And I think the conclusion that Hal Huggins and others have come to is that what the establishment in dentistry wants is they want the amalgams to slowly go away and nobody to really notice or pay attention. Because if people paid attention to all the people that have been, made sick by this, they'd have liability off the charts, buku liability. There wouldn't be enough money in the world to pay off all the liability for all the illness and sickness they have caused. And they know they've done it, but they just keep it hidden. And the incidence of amalgam placement is going down, down, down. It's like a less than a fifth of what it used to be. And they're hoping it just fades into oblivion and these other newer materials will take the place. But one still has to be careful with these newer materials because the big pitfall in dentistry is that they sound nice at first, composite, porcelain, ceramics, but a lot of times they're alloys, meaning combination mixtures, which will often have other toxins in them, like aluminum. Some people will be very sensitive to that. Okay, one metaphor that Hal Huggins would make is that mercury can come into one area and become something else very quickly, like Clark Kent going into a phone booth and turning into Superman. And what they meant by that was you can have elemental mercury in your mouth get converted by the mouth bacteria into methyl mercury and become even more toxic. Okay. When it goes into a cell, it's converted into ionic mercury. It goes from being uncharged to having a 2+ positive charge, 2+ valence, Hg2+, ionic mercury it's called in that setting. And that will then be attracted to the mitochondria, becomes a mitochondrial toxin, can kill the cell and push it into apoptosis. Okay. The other point he made about mercury is it's so sneaky. Mercury really doesn't do what you want it to do. It just goes all over the place. You can inhale the vapor, goes from your lungs into your blood, travels all over the body. It's absorbed across your cheeks, it's absorbed in the sublingual space, goes through the lymphatic system, then gets into your blood, can travel anywhere in your body. The liver tries to excrete it, the kidney tries to excrete it, some of it gets stuck in the kidney parenchyma. Once it goes into the brain, gets converted into Hg2+, is ionic, it can no longer exit the cell, then it's trapped in your brain. So it has a tendency to accumulate in the brain. Obviously, that's not good. And so what he said, the description is trying to control mercury or make it go where you want to is about as easy as herding cats. It's an attempt to control something that's inherently uncontrollable. Okay? There's only one chelator that works. And, the genius Boyd Haley figured it out, the biochemist, NBMI, which is sort of like a superglutathione lipophilic molecule that they constructed and developed. When it was a supplement, they said, hey, this thing's too powerful, it can't be a supplement, it has to be a regular drug. But now it's an orphan drug, nobody wants to pay for it to get approved through clinical trials, so it's not approved, so it's taken off the market. So you've got millions and millions of patients with mercury toxicity who would benefit from that drug, but because nobody wants to take a chance on it, they're not sure they can profit from it, it's not, I guess it's probably not patentable, it doesn't get approved. And that's a freaking disaster. There's tons, millions upon millions of people sick, and they can't get this NBMI chelator approved. Okay. Welcome to the real world. That's why if you try to understand medicine based on helping patients, you'll never understand anything. If you try to think of it in terms of money and power and things like that, legal liability, so that's why establishments will hide the complications of things like fluoride, mercury, and root canals, then everything will make sense to you. Okay, we'll just do this one page right here of lines from Solving MS Mystery by Hal Huggins. The book was written in 2002. He says, root canals are far more devastating than amalgams. The toxicity of root canals has been known by medical and dental professions since 1900. Most of our current autoimmune disease stems from root canal toxins. Now you got to remember, he's looking through the glasses of a dentist who has, 20 people, 30 people calling him every day saying, please remove my amalgams and my root canals. I've got autoimmune disease. So he thinks it's all from that, but I don't think it is. Because there's a lot more experience in the conventional medical world that has a bigger patient base, that is primarily a diet thing with leaky gut. But this dental stuff, I do believe, is a major contributor to it. And you want to know about this option so you can cure these patients. It's no longer a blind spot. You have to know what causes the disease to know what to avoid, to know what to change. And now you know the mouth is a major source of disease. That's valuable information. He says, yet the dental profession hangs on to dead teeth, meaning root canal teeth, like their lives depended on it. Detoxification must be done correctly, or it is retoxification. If you use like the wrong type of chelator, it'll just pull the mercury out of the amalgam and send it somewhere else in your body. So you have to have something that's going to hang on to it tightly so it can be excreted, okay, and not going to be dropped off somewhere else in the body. Every great doctor has great mentors, and Hal Huggins was lucky enough to be taught by Weston Price. He was also taught by a doctor named Olympio Pinto, whose father was a dentist. And the father had seen reversal of cancer, reversal of leukemia in a young girl when he removed her amalgams. And so then they became aware that amalgams can induce cancer in some patients. It's rare, but it can stimulate a leukemia by overactivating the immune system. And if you notice, this is very much like the Alan Cunningham theory, of which Dr. McDougall gave a lecture. Remember Dr. McDougall gave a lecture about lymphoma? He said Alan Cunningham proposed back in about 1975 that overstimulation of the immune system by all the inflammation associated with meat caused the immune system to become hyperactive, and it couldn't shut itself off, and that was lymphoma, okay? So they're basically saying the same thing here, though. Lymphoma is more of a relatively solid tumor enlarging the lymph nodes, versus leukemia is a little bit more of a so-called liquid tumor in the sense that it's primarily elevation of the lymphocytes in the blood. Okay, but it's good to know this. So if you know somebody's got a leukemia, if I had one, I'd get all those amalgams and root canals out muy pronto. And I'd make sure I did the proper technique. I'd go to an IAOMT dentist at IAOMT.org where they've got extra training in removing these things. So Dr. Hal Huggins also said, before me was a medical doctor dying of leukemia. He had been everywhere and done everything that his medical colleagues had to offer. I took out his amalgams, and 24 hours later, zoop, his leukemia cells disappeared, okay? So what I'm trying to say is, then these patients, they go back to the conventional doctor, and the conventional doctor says, oh, spontaneous remission. No, it's not spontaneous. They had a treatment. They had removal of their amalgams and their root canal teeth, clearance of the infectious toxins from the anaerobic bacteria. So it was not a spontaneous remission, but it gets labeled in the charts as a spontaneous remission. So conventional medicine doesn't learn anything from it, okay? So listen to what Hal Huggins said. He said, every week I had a patient like this, and that's why I wrote this book. Because you kind of come to a point in your life where you say, you know what, I'm going to do what's right. And that's also why you want Christians, okay? Christian ethics say, do what is right. What is right is more important than where the money is. Do what is right, okay? You need some money to pay your bills, okay? But Christian ethics, I will do what is right by my patient rather than what the establishment wants me to do, okay? That's an important thing. If you can't have good medicine and you can't have good science without Christian ethics. Anybody who tells you otherwise is full of crap. I know all the science. I've been to Harvard. I've been to Stanford, all the fancy places. I can tell you, unless you have Christian ethics and say this patient and their well-being and what's best for them is more important than the money, then why would anybody ever try to help the patient when they get 10 times, 100 times as much money if they lie, cheat, screw over the patient? Okay, drug them and chop them up. Okay, that's where the money comes from. The money comes from lying, drugging, and chopping up people. It doesn't come from telling them the truth and empowering them. Okay, so that's why you have to have Christian ethics. That which you do to the least of my brethren, you do unto me. That's what Jesus Christ said, and that's what makes a difference. And that's what you have to have. And anybody who tells you otherwise, they're either a liar or an idiot, okay? Because I say this to patients sometimes. I say the only thing that can fix healthcare is Christianity. They give me this look like, are you crazy? Are you some type of religious nut? No, because I've been a doctor, over 30 years, many years, and I know from a fact, do the right thing. And the right thing comes from, I value this patient more than I do the money, more than I do the insurance company, more than I do the drug company, more than I do the hospital system. You have to say that, because that's the only thing that can get you to do the right thing. The rest of the system is based on making as much money as possible, running the patient through as fast as possible like an assembly line. So you have to have that righteousness in your heart. I will do right by this person. I will give them a chance at least and tell them what is the right thing to do. And the reality of the situation is the vast majority of patients are too lazy and too stupid that you really can't help them. I've told countless patients about the value of the low-fat vegan diet, and they give me this look like I'm being weird or stupid, and they're like, well, I'm going to a very good doctor. I'm going to go, yeah, right, you fat, stupid chump. Have fun getting drugged and chopped up. I see that all the time. I see that every day, as a matter of fact. And I see that even in my friends. I got people in my family, graduate degrees, doctors and stuff. They're fat and sick and stupid, and they don't want to change. So it's kind of human nature to not want to change. Okay, now here's Hal Huggins. He continues. Why does the establishment deny the side effects of amalgams? And, it's thought to be the main reason to avoid the liability. There's another speaker, a famous guy named Dr. Vimy, a famous dentist. He's one of the co-founders of the IAOMT organization. It says it just wants amalgams to go away slowly with no legal liability to itself, because it's a great amount of financial liability. And Hal Huggins says the establishment has a lot of liability. Lie, the word lie, and the word ability. Lying ability. Okay, after removing amalgams and root canals, spinal taps of multiple sclerosis patients to obtain their cerebral spinal fluid from their spinal canals would change in 10 days. So they would do it 10 days later, and all the abnormal proteins would be gone. And they had a hard time identifying the specific individual proteins, and it was more like it was just the brain being scraped, necrosed, brain damaged tissue sloughed off from dead cells. Okay, nickel is the most carcinogenic metal of all of them. They said mercury just kills cells. It's a more aggressive toxin, but mercury turns the cells into cancer. Okay? Is this new information? He goes, well, it was about 60 years ago, not anymore. Nickel is frequently used in crowns, bridges, removable partial dentures, some amalgams, orthodontic braces. And why? Because it's strong and it's cheap. Okay? Mercury kills lymphocytes, and mercury compromises the immune system. Some young people will have that overreaction to the immune system, and their lymphocytes will go up, like even a leukemia. But sometimes also then it starts killing so many lymphocytes that it diminishes their lymphocyte number and function, and their immune system is severely suppressed. And these people are at increased risk for infections, increased risk at cancer, because your immune system is what removes cancer. Okay. And so what Hal Huggins here is saying is, he says, my interest in multiple sclerosis was started by accidentally creating reversals of disease and being shocked to see this happen. He's like, wow, I'm curing these people. I got to learn more about this. I should be doing more of this. Okay, and that's how he got started down that path, the hero's journey of taking instead of staying on the beaten path, he went off on his own individual path to be a discoverer and a great pioneer of dentistry. Okay, so that'll be it now for part 3 of Solving the Multiple Sclerosis Mystery by Hal Huggins. I hope you're finding this helpful.